I'd rather have been left at the orphanage than be his daughter. Those words from my own child cut deeper than any wound I'd suffered in 27 years as a firefighter. But what my daughter doesn't know, what no one in that therapy room knows, is that I've kept a burned receipt in my wallet for 25 years. A receipt from the night I pulled her from a blazing orphanage, when both our lives changed forever. Some secrets are meant to protect the ones we love. Others destroy us from within. As my health fails and time runs out, I must decide whether to take the truth to my grave or reveal everything. About the fire, about her biological father's corruption, about why I've spent decades keeping her at arm's length. Because the hardest part of loving someone isn't saving them once, it's letting them go when they don't want to be saved. If this story touched your heart, please follow our channel for more emotional true stories that will stay with you long after they end. Like and comment to let us know where you're watching from, and share your thoughts on what you would have done in Hank's position. I never thought I'd live long enough to hear my own daughter say, in front of a therapist and our entire family, I'd rather have been left at the orphanage than be his daughter. In that instant, I felt my chest tighten like it used to on those nights when I'd rush into burning buildings. Only this time, I couldn't save anyone. Not her. Not myself. My name is Hank Delaney and I'm 68 years old. I was a firefighter for 27 of those years. I carry scars on my body that don't just come from fire. I carry in my soul the silence of raising a girl I saved with my own hands. A girl who today won't even speak my name. My right knee creaks. My spine stays crooked, but I never once bent. Until that day. While everyone in the room looked embarrassed, she stared at me like I was garbage. And as much as I wanted to walk out of there and never come back, I didn't leave. I stayed. In silence. Because what she doesn't know, what nobody in that room knows, is that if I had the chance, I'd save her again. Even knowing that one day she'd spit on me with her words. I remember looking down at my calloused hands that morning as I got dressed for the therapy session. These hands had pulled her from flames, buttoned her first school uniform, and awkwardly braided her hair when she was 7. These same hands now trembled as I straightened my collar, wondering if today would be the day she'd finally hear me out. "Mr. Delaney, would you like to respond to what Ellie just said?" The therapist's voice was gentle but firm. She was a woman about 45, with reading glasses that kept sliding down her nose. The office smelled like lavender and old books. I looked across the room at my daughter, Ellie, my beautiful Ellie, now 30 years old, with her mother's jawline and a stranger's hatred in her eyes. Her husband Mark sat beside her, staring at the floor. They'd been married 3 years, and he'd never once looked me in the eye when she was criticizing me. My sister Patricia was there too, clutching her purse like it might shield her from the family's dirty laundry being aired out. My voice cracked. Decades of smoke inhalation and grief had turned it into sandpaper. "I never meant to make you feel that way, Ellie." She laughed. Not the giggly laugh from when she was 10 and I'd chase her around the yard with the garden hose. This was a harsh, cutting sound that made everyone in the room flinch. "You never meant to?" That's rich, Hank. She'd been calling me by my first name for years now. Each time felt like a small knife between my ribs. "You never meant to be cold and distant? You never meant to make me feel like I was some burden you regretted picking up? Like I was some stray dog you felt obligated to feed?" The therapist tried to intervene. Perhaps we could discuss specific instances where... "No," Ellie cut her off. "There's nothing to discuss. He knows what he did. All those nights I cried myself to sleep. All those school events he never showed up for because he was working. And all those times I needed a father and got a roommate instead. Each accusation landed like a blow, and I took them all. Because what could I say? That I worked double shifts to afford her dance lessons? That I missed her recitals because I was terrified of embarrassing her with my limping gait and working-class manners? That I stayed quiet because every time I opened my mouth, I feared I'd say the wrong thing and she'd realize I wasn't good enough to be her father. You know what, Doctor? Winters?" She turned to the therapist, her voice rising. "I've spent years in therapy trying to understand why I have such a hard time connecting with people. Why I always feel like I'm not enough. And it all comes back to him. To his emotional abandonment." I felt my throat closing up. Emotional abandonment. Is that what she thought? When I'd spent every waking moment of the past 3 decades thinking about her safety, her future, her happiness, I'd rather have been left at the orphanage than be his daughter. At least then, I might have had a chance at a real family. Someone who actually wanted me. The room went silent. Even the old wall clock seemed to hold its breath. What she didn't know, what I'd never told her, was that I had the receipt from the orphanage tucked away in my wallet. Yellowed and worn from being folded and unfolded 1,000 times. The paper was my talisman, my reminder of the day my life gained meaning again. The day I became her father. What she didn't know was that I'd wanted her more than I'd ever wanted anything in my life. I stood up slowly, my knee protesting with a crack that echoed in the quiet room. I think, I said, my voice steadier than I felt, that we should continue this another time. Typical, Ellie muttered, walking away when things get tough. I paused at the door, one hand on the knob. I wanted to turn around. I wanted to pull out that orphanage receipt and show her how wrong she was. I wanted to tell her about the fire, about how finding her had saved me as much as I'd saved her. But I didn't, because some truths are like fire. They can warm you, or they can burn everything to the ground. So I walked out. Not because I was giving up, but because I needed time to figure out how to fight for her one last time. I just didn't know then that the fight would change everything we thought we knew about each other. It was the autumn of 1999, when the Gadsden Municipal Orphanage caught fire. I remember it like it was yesterday. The screams, the smoke, the ceiling giving way. The call came in at 2:37 a.m. I know because I checked my watch twice, wondering why fate had dragged me out of bed at the exact minute my wife Eleanor had died 6 months earlier. The night air was crisp with that special kind of October cold that seeps into your bones. The kind that makes you pull your jacket tighter even when you're wearing full firefighting gear. We could see the orange glow from 3 blocks away. When we rounded the corner onto Maple Street, my heart sank. The east wing was already fully engulfed, flames shooting 30 feet into the air, licking at the dark Alabama sky like hungry demons. "Delaney, take Johnson and secure the west entrance," Chief Morales shouted over the chaos. The wail of approaching ambulances mixed with the crackle of burning wood and the shouts of my fellow firefighters. Children in pajamas huddled together on the lawn, some crying, others eerily silent, their faces illuminated by the dancing flames. I remember adjusting my oxygen mask, the familiar weight of my axe in my right hand. Johnson nodded at me, his eyes wide but determined behind his visor. We'd been through hell together before, but something felt different that night. Maybe it was the children. Maybe it was because I couldn't stop thinking about the emptiness waiting for me back home. We entered through the side door, immediately hit by a wall of heat that made my skin prickle despite the protective gear. The smoke was thick, black, and angry. The kind that tells you this fire isn't just consuming wood and plaster but synthetic materials, plastics, maybe even chemicals. "Johnson, check the common area," I shouted, my voice muffled by the mask. "I'll take the dormitories." The hallway was a maze of falling debris and smoke. I crawled low, sweeping my hand before me, calling out into the darkness. No answers came. According to the staff, all the children had been evacuated, but procedure demanded we check every room. The building groaned above me, a sound every firefighter knows and fears. It meant the structure wouldn't hold much longer. I had cleared 3 rooms when I heard it. A soft, barely there cough coming from the end of the hall. Not the harsh adult cough of another firefighter, but the small, fragile cough of a child. My radio crackled. "Delaney, get out now, the roof's coming down." Johnson's voice was urgent, frightened. I hesitated for half a second. That hesitation nearly cost me my life, but it saved hers. "Got a possible civilian. East wing, end of corridor," I shouted into my radio, already moving toward the sound. The last room was small, a storage closet that had been converted into a makeshift bedroom. The smoke was thinner here, drawn upward by a broken window. And there, curled up beneath a desk, wrapped in a thin blanket with singed edges, was a little girl. She couldn't have been more than 5 years old, her dark hair matted to her forehead, her eyes half closed, struggling for each breath. I'll never forget how small she looked, how fragile, like a little bird fallen from its nest. When I reached for her, she didn't resist or cry out. She just looked at me with those big, trusting eyes that somehow reminded me of Eleanor's. "I've got you, sweetheart," I whispered, though I knew she couldn't hear me through the mask. "You're safe now." I scooped her up, blanket and all, and turned to leave. That's when I heard the terrible cracking sound above us. I didn't even have time to look up. Instinct took over. I curled my body around hers and dove forward just as a burning beam crashed down behind us, blocking our exit. The pain was immediate and searing as something caught my right leg. My knee twisted unnaturally and I felt, rather than heard, the pop. But the girl was still in my arms, still breathing, still looking at me with those eyes. Nothing else mattered. I scrambled to my feet, ignoring the white-hot agony shooting up my leg. The window was our only chance now. It was small, but just big enough. I smashed out the remaining glass with my elbow, checked the drop, about 10 feet to a grassy area, and made my decision. "Hold on tight," I told the girl, though I doubt she understood. I took a deep breath, said a quick prayer to a God I wasn't sure I believed in anymore, and jumped. The landing was rough. My injured knee gave out immediately, and I twisted to take the brunt of the fall on my left side, keeping the girl cushioned against my chest. We rolled together across the grass, away from the burning building, until we came to a stop near a gnarled old oak tree. I lay there gasping for clean air, the girl still clutched in my arms. Above us, the stars were blotted out by smoke and the red glow of fire. But we were alive. Both of us, somehow, alive. The paramedics found us there minutes later. They had to pry my arms open to take the girl. I didn't want to let go. It felt like if I did, I'd be letting go of something essential, something I'd been missing since Eleanor died. I visited her in the hospital 3 days later, my knee bandaged and braced, moving with the help of a cane I already hated. She was in the children's ward, surrounded by stuffed animals donated by local charities. The nurses told me she hadn't spoken a word since the fire. Not one word. When I entered her room, those eyes found mine immediately. There was no fear in them, no confusion, just a quiet recognition that pierced straight through all my defenses. "Hi there," I said awkwardly, lowering myself into the chair beside her bed. "Remember me?" She didn't speak, but she reached out one small hand and placed it on top of mine. A simple gesture that changed everything. It was then that I overheard 2 nurses whispering outside the door. Something about the girl being connected to someone important, about adoption papers being fast-tracked and manipulated, about money changing hands to make certain problems disappear. I should have walked away right then. Should have thanked God for letting me save her and gone back to my empty house and my grief. Instead, I squeezed her tiny hand and made a decision that would reshape both our lives forever. "I'm not going to let anyone hurt you," I promised. "Not ever again." Becoming a father wasn't something I planned. Not after Eleanor. When cancer took her, it took my future too. All those late-night conversations about names for children we'd never have. About the house with the big backyard we'd never buy. But life has a way of burning down your plans and building something different from the ashes. I still remember the sterile smell of the hospital hallway the day I made my decision. It was raining outside. A gentle Alabama drizzle that made the world beyond the windows look soft and blurry, like an old photograph. My leg was throbbing. The doctor said I'd need surgery, that I might walk with a limp for the rest of my life. Small price to pay, I thought, for the little girl down the hall who was still breathing because of me. Her name, according to the sparse records that survived the fire, was Jane Doe. No known parents, no known family. Just another lost soul in a system too overwhelmed to care properly. They'd found her abandoned on the orphanage steps 3 years earlier with nothing but a handwritten note that said simply, "Please love her." No name, no birth date, nothing. I was sitting in the hospital cafeteria, picking at a turkey sandwich that tasted like cardboard, when Marjorie Simmons slid into the seat across from me. Marge had been my captain's wife's best friend for 30 years and worked as a senior social worker for Etowah County. Her face was lined with the kind of wrinkles that come from a lifetime of bearing other people's burdens. "You've been visiting her every day, Hank," she said without preamble, stirring cream into her coffee. "The nurses are talking." I shrugged, uncomfortable under her knowing gaze. "Just checking on her, making sure she's okay." Marge's eyes softened. "She's not talking to anyone but you. Did you know that? 4 days of silence, then you limp in there and suddenly she's whispering. Not much, but something." I hadn't known. The thought made my throat tight. "What happens to her now?" I asked, trying to sound casual. Marge glanced around, then leaned forward. "That's what I came to talk to you about. There's something not right about this situation, Hank. The fire inspector found evidence of arson, and there are people, important people, who want this all to go away quietly." My hands tightened around my coffee cup. "What kind of people?" "The kind who make phone calls from government offices." Her voice dropped even lower. "The kind who can make a child disappear into the system and never be found again." A chill ran through me that had nothing to do with the hospital's aggressive air conditioning. "What are you saying, Marge?" She reached across the table and placed her hand over mine. The same gesture the little girl had made days earlier. "I'm saying that child needs protection. Real protection. And I'm saying you look at her the way a father looks at his daughter. I'm a single man with a busted knee and a job that keeps me away for 24 hours at a stretch," I said. But even as the words left my mouth, I knew they were just excuses. Weak ones. Marge's smile was sad and knowing. And I'm a social worker who's seen too many children lost in the shuffle. Sometimes, Hank, the system isn't enough. Sometimes it takes one person willing to break the rules to save a life. That conversation changed everything. Over the next 2 weeks, Marge became my co-conspirator. She helped me navigate a system designed to keep people like me, single, middle-aged men with dangerous jobs, from adopting. We falsified documents. I used an address where I didn't live, claimed a non-existent support system, and lied about my medical condition. The worst moment came when I had to sign a statement saying I had no knowledge of the child's background or biological family. I knew it was a lie, or at least I suspected it was based on what Marge had told me. But I signed anyway, my hand steady even as my conscience wavered. "This is a crime," I told Marge, as we sat on a bench outside the courthouse, the adoption papers tucked safely in a manila folder between us. "I could lose my job. You could lose yours." She looked out at the children playing in the park across the street, her expression unreadable. "You know what Eleanor would say if she were here?" The mention of my wife's name sent a pang through my chest. "What?" "She'd say some crimes are acts of love, and that makes them necessary." On the day I brought her home, my daughter now, legally, if not by blood, the rain had finally stopped. The sun broke through the clouds as we pulled into the driveway of my modest 2-bedroom house. I'd spent every free moment of the past week turning my home office into a little girl's bedroom, painting the walls a soft yellow because the child psychologist said it was a calming color. She stood in the doorway of her new room, still silent, still watching me with those eyes that seemed to see right through me. "Do you like it?" I asked, suddenly nervous. What did I know about little girls? About being a father? She nodded slowly, then walked to the small desk where I'd placed a stuffed bear, the only possession she'd had at the hospital. She picked it up, hugged it to her chest, and then did something that broke my heart and healed it all at once. She smiled. That night, as I tucked her into bed for the first time, I realized I hadn't given her a name yet. On the paperwork, Marge had left it blank for me to fill in. "What should I call you?" I asked softly, sitting on the edge of her bed. "Do you remember your name from before?" She shook her head, those solemn eyes never leaving mine. I took a deep breath. "Would it be okay if I called you Ellie?" It was my wife's name, Eleanor, but I called her Ellie. She was the best person I ever knew. The little girl considered this for a long moment, then nodded once, decisively. "Ellie," she whispered, trying out the sound. It was only the third word she'd spoken since the fire. The first had been hi when I visited her in the hospital. The second had been stay when I'd gotten up to leave. I tucked the blanket around her shoulders, my heart so full it felt like it might burst. "Ellie Delaney," I said, "my daughter." What I didn't tell her, what I never told her, was about the burned receipt from the orphanage that I kept folded in my wallet, or about the fire investigation report that Marge smuggled to me weeks later, with certain names blacked out but one left visible, State Representative Martin Chambers, or about the whispered rumors that connected him to both the orphanage's financial irregularities and to a certain child left on its doorstep years earlier. Some truths are too heavy for small shoulders, so I carried them alone, believing that one day when she was older, stronger, I would tell her everything. That was my first mistake of many, thinking there would ever be a right time to explain that her life with me began with necessary lies. The years flew by like embers caught in the wind. Ellie grew from that silent, watchful child into a girl with a voice that could cut through steel when she wanted something. And God, did she want things. Not material possessions, though there were those too. No, what Ellie hungered for most was knowledge, challenge, achievement. She devoured books like they were oxygen, stayed up late solving math problems that made my head spin, and asked questions I didn't know how to answer. By the time she turned 12, she'd developed a talent for the piano that left me speechless the first time I heard her play. I'd bought the old upright on a whim from a garage sale down the street, thinking maybe she'd enjoy learning. I never expected her to sit down and teach herself. But that was Ellie, fiercely independent, determined to master anything she set her mind to. What she couldn't master was me. I remember her 13th birthday. I'd taken a rare day off from the station, spent hours decorating the living room with streamers and balloons while she was at school. Made her favorite, lasagna with extra cheese, from scratch, following Eleanor's recipe that I kept tucked in the family Bible. Even baked a cake that listed slightly to the left but tasted just fine. When she walked in and saw it all, her eyes lit up for just a moment before that familiar wall came down between us. "You didn't have to do all this," she said, dropping her backpack by the door. "Wanted to," I replied, wiping my hands nervously on a dish towel. "It's not every day my girl turns 13. She looked around at the decorations, at the carefully wrapped presents on the coffee table, at the dinner waiting on the kitchen table. Then she looked at me, really looked at me, with an expression I couldn't read. "Thanks," she said finally, but the word fell flat between us. We ate dinner mostly in silence. I asked about school. She gave one-word answers. I told a story about a call we'd responded to that week. Nothing scary, just a cat stuck in a tree like in the movies. And she smiled politely, but didn't laugh. After cake, she opened her presents. A new sketch pad and professional colored pencils because she'd been drawing more lately. A biography of Marie Curie because she'd mentioned an interest in chemistry. And finally, the big one, a silver locket with Eleanor's picture inside. "This was your—" I stopped, corrected myself. "This was Eleanor's, my wife's. I thought you might like to have it." Ellie opened the locket, studied the photo inside. Eleanor's smile beamed back at her, frozen in time. "She was pretty," she said softly. "She was beautiful," I agreed, inside and out. Ellie closed the locket and set it carefully on the table. She didn't put it on. "Dad," she said, and something in her voice made me sit up straighter. "Can I ask you something?" "Anything," I said, meaning it. "Why don't you ever talk about my real parents?" The question hit me like a blow to the chest. In all our years together, she'd never directly asked about her birth parents. There had been hints, sideways glances, moments when I thought she might bring it up, but she never had. Until now. I started, then stopped, unsure what to say. The truth? A comforting lie? Some version in between? "I don't know much about them, Ellie." It wasn't entirely untrue. I had suspicions, rumors, a name on a document, but no concrete facts. Nothing I could tell a 13-year-old girl looking for her origins. "But you must know something," she pressed. "The adoption agency must have told you something." I looked down at my hands, firefighter's hands, rough and scarred. Not the hands of a man who knew how to navigate this conversation. "The records were incomplete," I said carefully. "There was a fire at the orphanage where you were living. A lot of information was lost." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "A fire? You never told me that." "It was a long time ago," I said, feeling the conversation slipping away from me. "You were very young. So my real parents, they what? Gave me up? Died? What?" I swallowed hard. "As far as I know, you were left at the orphanage as a baby. There wasn't much information beyond that." She was quiet for a long moment, studying my face the way she studied her textbooks, searching for answers, for hidden meanings between the lines. "Do you think they ever looked for me? After they left me?" The question broke my heart. "I don't know, sweetheart," I said honestly. "But I do know they missed out on knowing an amazing person." She nodded, but I could tell my answer didn't satisfy her. How could it? I'd given her crumbs when she was hungry for a feast. That night, after she'd gone to bed, I sat alone at the kitchen table with a glass of whiskey I didn't drink, and the weight of unspoken truths on my shoulders. The partially burned investigation report was hidden in my lockbox in the closet. Martin Chambers had risen from state representative to U.S. congressman in the years since. His face smiled from campaign billboards all over town. I should have told her something, anything that night. But I convinced myself I was protecting her from the truth about a biological father who had covered up his mistakes with money and influence, from the knowledge that her existence was considered a liability by powerful people, from the fact that her adoption was built on falsified documents and necessary lies. Instead, I said nothing. And in that silence, something between us began to bleed. The pattern continued through her teenage years. She excelled academically, winning scholarships and awards that filled me with a pride I couldn't adequately express. But she grew more distant with each passing year. When she was home, she stayed in her room. When we spoke, it was about practical matters, schedules, school events, household needs. On her 18th birthday, she announced she'd been accepted to Princeton with a full scholarship. I took her out to celebrate at the fanciest restaurant in town, awkward in my best suit, painfully aware of my rough edges in the elegant setting. "I'm so proud of you, Ellie," I said, raising my glass of water and a toast. "Your mother would have been too." She flinched slightly at the mention of Eleanor, as she always did. "Thanks," she said, not meeting my eyes. "I leave in August." "I know. I've already put in for time off to drive you up there." She set down her fork. "Actually, I was thinking of flying. Sarah's parents are driving her to New Jersey, and they offered me a ride with them." Sarah, her best friend since 9th grade, the daughter of a local dentist and his wife who lived in a house 3 times the size of ours and took vacations to Europe. "Oh," I said, trying to hide my disappointment. "If that's what you want." "It just makes more sense logistically," she said, as if we were discussing a tactical fire response plan and not the fact that she didn't want me involved in this milestone moment. I nodded, swallowing the hurt. "Whatever you think is best." When August came, I helped her pack her things into Sarah's parents' SUV, stood in the driveway waving as they pulled away, Ellie's face briefly visible in the rear window, not looking back. That night, my phone rang just as I was heading to bed. Ellie's name on the screen made my heart jump. "Hello?" I answered, trying not to sound too eager. "Hi," she said, her voice small and far away. "I just wanted to let you know we made it safely." "That's good," I said. "How's the campus?" "Beautiful. Overwhelming." A pause. "I should go. It's late." "Ellie," I said quickly before she could hang up. I love you," I wanted to say. "I miss you already. I'm sorry for all the ways I've failed you." "Take care of yourself," I said instead. "I will," she replied. "Bye, Hank." Hank. Not Dad, just Hank. It was the first time she'd called me by my name. It wouldn't be the last. When I arrived home after that therapy session, the house felt emptier than it had in years. Funny how silence can have weight, how absence can feel like a physical presence pressing down on your chest. I unlocked the door, dropped my keys on the side table with a clatter that echoed through the rooms, and stood there in the hallway, suddenly unsure what to do with myself. My leg was throbbing. The old injury always acted up when I was stressed or when rain was coming. Today it was probably both. I limped to the kitchen, filled a glass with tap water, and downed 2 pain pills that I knew wouldn't help much but took anyway out of habit. The house hadn't changed much in the 25 years since I'd brought Ellie home. Same faded wallpaper in the hallway, same creaky floorboard by the refrigerator, same family photos hanging slightly crooked on the walls despite my best efforts to straighten them. Ellie as a gap-toothed 7-year-old holding up a science fair ribbon. Ellie at high school graduation, her smile tight and formal. Ellie at her college commencement, me standing awkwardly beside her. Both of us looking like strangers who happened to be photographed together. What the photos didn't show were all the silences between us. The questions never asked. The truths never shared. I made my way to the living room and sank into my old recliner, the leather cracked and worn from years of use. Outside the window, the streetlights were just coming on, casting long shadows across the yard. The same yard where I'd once pushed Ellie on a tire swing, where I'd taught her to ride a bike, where I'd watched her practice soccer drills with grim determination. I'd rather have been left at the orphanage than be his daughter. The words played on a loop in my mind, each repetition like a nail being driven deeper into my heart. Was that really how she saw her life with me? As something worse than abandonment? I closed my eyes, letting my head fall back against the chair. But instead of darkness, I saw flames. I always did when the memories got too close. Orange and red tendrils licking at wood and plaster, black smoke thick enough to choke on, and in the middle of it all, a small figure wrapped in a singed blanket. With a groan, I pushed myself up from the chair and made my way down the hall to my bedroom. It wasn't much. A double bed with a plain navy comforter, a nightstand with a lamp and a dog-eared paperback I'd been trying to finish for months, a dresser with a few framed photos on top. But in the corner stood an old wooden chest that Eleanor had brought into our marriage, the one piece of furniture that had survived our humble beginnings and all the years since. I knelt before it, my knee protesting the movement, and lifted the heavy lid. The hinges creaked from disuse. I rarely opened this chest anymore, though I couldn't bring myself to get rid of it either. Inside lay the physical remnants of my life. My firefighter's badge, polished and tucked in its presentation box from my retirement ceremony 10 years ago, the folded American flag from Eleanor's funeral, a small velvet box containing her wedding ring, which I'd never had the heart to sell despite some lean years when the money would have helped. And beneath it all, a manila envelope, its edges worn soft from handling, its contents untouched for years. My hands trembled slightly as I withdrew the envelope and carried it to the bed. I sat on the edge of the mattress, feeling suddenly old and tired in a way that had nothing to do with my 68 years. Inside the envelope were the documents Marjorie had helped me procure all those years ago. The falsified home study report that claimed I had a sister living nearby who could help with childcare. I didn't. The medical clearance that conveniently omitted the extent of my knee injury and the pain medication I was taking at the time. The character references from colleagues who had stretched the truth about my emotional stability in the months following Eleanor's death. And at the very bottom, 2 items I hadn't looked at in decades: the partially burned receipt from the orphanage and the fire investigation report with its damning evidence. The receipt was little more than a slip of paper now, yellowed with age, its edges blackened and crumbling. But the essential information remained legible. Received into care, female child, approx. 2 years of age, no identifying documents. Caseworker assigned, Margaret Wilson. And below that, a date that I knew by heart and a case number that had been crossed out and rewritten multiple times, as if someone had been trying to create confusion in the records. The investigation report was more substantial, 15 pages of technical analysis and witness statements, most of it dealing with the likely cause of the fire, faulty wiring officially, but with notes indicating possible accelerants found at the scene. But it was the financial section that had always haunted me. Documented evidence of funds being diverted from the orphanage's operating budget, signatures forged on checks, and a trail that led directly to Martin Chambers, then a rising star in state politics. And buried in the appendix, a single paragraph that connected it all. Witness statements suggest Representative Chambers made multiple unlogged visits to the facility in the years preceding the incident, allegedly to visit a female child approximately 5 years of age. Staff reported being instructed to keep these visits off the official visitor logs. There was no definitive statement that Ellie was that child. No DNA evidence, no birth certificate, nothing concrete enough to hold up in court. Just circumstantial connections and whispered rumors. But it had been enough to make Marjorie risk her career to get Ellie out of the system before Chambers and his people could make her disappear. I spread the documents across the faded bedspread, staring at them as if they might rearrange themselves into some new pattern that would tell me what to do now. The weight of 25 years of secrets pressed down on me, making it hard to breathe. What would Ellie say if she knew? That her biological father was likely a corrupt politician who had embezzled funds from the very orphanage where he'd hidden her away. That her adoption had been built on falsified documents and backroom deals. That the fire that might have claimed her life was possibly connected to her father's attempts to cover his tracks. Would knowing make her hate me less? Or more? I gathered the documents with shaking hands and returned them to the envelope. Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I reached for the phone and dialed Marjorie's number. It rang 4 times before going to voicemail. Of course, it was nearly 9 o'clock, and Marge was 74 now, probably already in bed. "Marge, it's Hank," I said after the beep. "I need to talk to you about Ellie. About everything. Call me when you can." I hung up and sat there in the growing darkness of my bedroom, the envelope heavy in my hands. Outside, rain had started to fall, pattering against the window in a rhythm that reminded me of the crackle of flames. Always back to the fire. Always back to that night when I'd made a choice that changed both our lives forever. I tucked the envelope into my nightstand drawer and lay back on the bed, not bothering to undress or get under the covers. The ceiling above me had a water stain in the shape of a cloud that I'd been meaning to fix for years. Ellie had pointed it out the last time she'd visited, her voice sharp with criticism. "You're letting this place fall apart, Hank." As I drifted into an uneasy sleep, I wondered if she was right. If I'd let everything that mattered fall apart, piece by piece, year by year, silence by silence. Marjorie called me back the next morning. Her voice sounded older over the phone, raspier than I remembered, but still with that same no-nonsense tone that had guided me through the most challenging days of my life. "It's been a while, Hank," she said. "How's that knee holding up?" "About as well as the rest of me," I replied, shifting in my kitchen chair. Outside, the morning light filtered through clouds, casting weak shadows across the yard. Thanks for calling back. Your message sounded urgent. What's going on with Ellie? I took a deep breath, twisting the phone cord between my fingers like I used to do with my wedding band. We had a therapy session yesterday. Family counseling. Her idea, believe it or not. That sounds promising, Marjorie said cautiously. It wasn't. The words came out harsher than I intended. She said she wished she'd been left at the orphanage rather than being raised by me. The silence on the other end stretched out so long I thought we might have been disconnected. Finally, Marjorie sighed. Oh, Hank. I'm thinking about telling her, Marge. Everything. The fire, the adoption, Chambers. Another long pause. Are you sure that's wise? After all this time? I looked down at the envelope I'd placed on the kitchen table that morning. Its contents spread out before me like evidence at a crime scene. I don't know what else to do. She hates me, and she doesn't even know why. Maybe if she understood, or maybe she'd hate you even more. Marjorie interrupted. For keeping the truth from her all these years. I can't keep living like this, I said, my voice cracking slightly. With this wall between us. With her thinking I don't know what she thinks I am. Cold? Distant? Some kind of monster who never loved her enough? Marjorie was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice was gentle but firm. You've carried this burden a long time, Hank. Maybe it is time to set it down, but be careful. The truth doesn't always set people free the way we hope it will. After we hung up, I sat at the kitchen table for a long time, staring at the documents before me. The sun had fully risen now, casting long rectangles of light across the worn linoleum floor. The house creaked and settled around me, familiar sounds that had been the backdrop to my life for decades. Finally, I reached for my cell phone, a simple flip model that Ellie always mocked whenever she saw it, and dialed her number. It rang 5 times before going to voicemail. I cleared my throat. Ellie, it's your dad. I was wondering if we could meet for dinner tonight. There's something important I need to talk to you about. Please call me back. I snapped the phone shut and waited. An hour passed, then 2. By noon, I'd convinced myself she wasn't going to call, that the last bridge between us had finally burned to ash. But at 12:47, just as I was making a sandwich I had no appetite for, the phone rang. Tonight works, she said without preamble. Luciano's at 7. Luciano's was an upscale Italian restaurant downtown, the kind of place where the waiters wore bow ties and the menu didn't list prices. Not my usual scene, but I wasn't going to argue. I'll be there, I promised. Fine, she said, and hung up before I could say anything else. I spent the rest of the afternoon in a state of nervous anticipation, trying to plan what I would say, how I would begin to unravel 25 years of secrets. Should I start with the fire? With the corruption at the orphanage? With my suspicions about her biological father? There was no good entry point, no gentle way to drop this bomb into her life. At 6, I showered and put on my best clothes. A navy blazer that had seen better days, gray slacks, and a light blue shirt that Eleanor had always said brought out my eyes. I polished my dress shoes, the ones I'd worn to Ellie's college graduation. I even dabbed on a bit of the cologne she'd given me for Christmas 3 years ago, still mostly full because I rarely had occasion to wear it. The orphanage receipt felt like it was burning a hole in my pocket as I drove downtown. I'd debated whether to bring the documents with me, eventually deciding to take just the receipt. Concrete evidence, something she could hold in her hands when the words became too much to take in. Luciano's was busy for a Tuesday night. The hostess, a young woman with sleek black hair pulled into a tight bun, led me to a table in the back where Ellie was already waiting. She wore a charcoal gray pantsuit, her dark hair cut in a stylish bob that framed her face. She looked more like Eleanor than ever, and the realization made my chest tighten. "You're late," she said as I sat down across from her. The candle between us cast flickering shadows across her face, making her expression hard to read. I checked my watch. 7:04. "Sorry," I said, though I wasn't really. 4 minutes hardly seemed worth mentioning. A waiter appeared at my elbow, asking if I'd like something to drink. Ellie already had a glass of white wine in front of her, half empty. "Just water," I said. The last thing I needed was alcohol muddling my thoughts tonight. Ellie picked up her menu, using it as a shield between us. "I already ordered," she said. "The risotto." "That sounds good," I replied, though I hadn't even opened my menu yet. "I'll have the same." The waiter nodded and disappeared, leaving us alone with the awkward silence that had become our default state. I cleared my throat, searching for a way to begin. "How's work?" I asked finally, falling back on safe territory. Ellie's mouth tightened slightly. She worked as a corporate lawyer for a firm in Birmingham, a career that seemed to involve long hours and high stress, though she rarely shared details with me. "Busy," she said. "We just closed a big merger." "That's good," I said, nodding as if I understood what that entailed. "And Mark? How's he doing?" "Fine." She took another sip of her wine. "Look, Hank, you said you had something important to talk about. What is it?" I reached into my pocket, my fingers closing around the receipt. This was it, the moment of truth, quite literally. "Ellie, there's something I've never told you. About how we became a family." Her eyebrows rose slightly. "You mean my adoption?" "I know I'm adopted, Hank. You haven't exactly kept that a secret." "No, but there's more to the story than you know." I pulled out the receipt and placed it on the table between us, my hand lingering on it for a moment before withdrawing. "Much more." She glanced at the yellowed paper, making no move to pick it up. "What's this?" "It's the receipt from the orphanage where I adopted you," I said quietly. "Or what's left of it after the fire." "Fire?" Her eyes flicked up to meet mine, sharp and suddenly attentive. "What fire?" I took a deep breath. "The fire at the Gadsden Municipal Orphanage, October 17, 1999. I was one of the firefighters who responded to the call." I watched recognition dawn on her face, followed quickly by confusion. You were there? At the orphanage where I lived?" "I was the one who found you," I said, my voice dropping even lower. "You were trapped in a storage room that had been converted into a bedroom. I carried you out just before the roof collapsed." Ellie stared at me, her face pale in the candlelight. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because I need you to understand." I struggled to find the right words. "I need you to know that I didn't just choose to adopt some random child. I saved you, and then I did everything in my power to keep you safe." "Safe from what?" she demanded, her voice rising slightly. Several diners at nearby tables glanced our way. I leaned forward, dropping my voice to just above a whisper. "There were people, powerful people, who wanted to make sure certain things about that orphanage never came to light. Corruption, embezzlement, and your biological father was right in the middle of it." Her eyes widened. "My father? You know who my biological father is?" "I have strong suspicions," I admitted. "His name was in the fire investigation report. Martin Chambers. He was a state representative back then." Ellie's hand flew to her mouth. "Congressman Chambers? The one who's running for Senate now?" I nodded grimly. "The same." She shook her head slowly, her eyes never leaving mine. "This is insane. You're telling me that a U.S. congressman is my father? And you've known this for 25 years and never said anything?" "I wasn't certain," I said, though the excuse sounded weak even to my own ears. "And I was trying to protect you. There were rumors that he was trying to make the situation go away. You were in danger, Ellie." She laughed then, a harsh sound with no humor in it. "So you lied to me. For my entire life. You let me believe I was just some unwanted child, abandoned by parents who didn't care, when all along—" "No," I interrupted. "You were abandoned, just not in the way you think. Your mother left a note with you at the orphanage. It said, 'I entrust my daughter to the only person who had the courage to save her.'" Ellie went very still. "My mother knew you?" "No," I said. "The note was found after the fire, after I'd already started the adoption process. Marjorie, the social worker who helped me adopt you, she showed it to me. She thought your mother somehow knew that someone would come for you someday, that someone would care enough to fight for you." Ellie stared at me for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then she picked up her purse and stood. "I need to go," she said, her voice tight with emotion. "Ellie, please." I reached for her hand, but she pulled away. "I'm telling you this because I want you to understand. Everything I did, every choice I made, it was all because I loved you. From the moment I pulled you out of that fire, you were my daughter." She looked down at me, tears shimmering in her eyes. "You're pathetic, Hank. You think this changes anything? You think some dramatic revelation about a fire and a corrupt politician makes up for 25 years of emotional abandonment?" The phrase hit me like a physical blow. "That's not fair," I said, my own voice rough with emotion. "I did the best I could. I was all alone, trying to raise a traumatized child." "Save it," she cut me off. "I don't want to hear your excuses, not anymore." She turned and walked away. weaving between tables with quick, determined steps. I sat there watching her go, the orphanage receipt still lying on the table between our untouched water glasses. The waiter appeared a moment later, 2 plates of steaming risotto balanced expertly on his arm. "Sir?" he said, looking confused at the half-empty table. "She had to leave," I said, my voice sounding distant to my own ears. "I'm sorry. I won't be staying either." I placed enough cash on the table to cover both meals and a generous tip, then tucked the receipt back into my pocket and limped out of the restaurant into the cool evening air. In the parking lot, I could see Ellie sitting in her car, her head bowed over the steering wheel. I wanted to go to her, to try again to make her understand. But some gulfs are too wide to cross, some wounds too deep to heal with words alone. So I got into my truck and drove home, alone with the weight of secrets finally spoken but still not heard. 3 months passed without a word from Ellie. 3 months of picking up the phone to call her, then setting it down again. 3 months of drafting emails I never sent. 3 months of walking past her childhood bedroom, door still ajar, everything preserved like a museum to a past that seemed increasingly distant and unreal. Winter settled over Alabama with unusual force that year. Not the mild, damp chill we were accustomed to, but a biting cold that crept through the cracks in my old house and settled into my bones. My knee ached constantly, a dull, throbbing pain that no amount of medication seemed to touch. But it was nothing compared to the hollow ache in my chest when I thought of Ellie, of the look on her face as she walked away from me at the restaurant, of all the words left unspoken between us. It was on a particularly frigid January morning that the dizzy spell hit. I was in the kitchen making coffee, when suddenly the room tilted sideways. My hand shot out to steady myself against the counter, but my fingers felt numb and strange, like they belonged to someone else. The coffee mug slipped from my grasp, shattering on the linoleum with a crash that seemed to come from very far away. I made it to the phone somehow, fumbling with buttons that swam before my eyes. Not 911. I'd spent too many years on the other side of emergency calls to want to put myself through that system. Instead, I called my neighbor, Bill Harmon, a retired pharmacist who'd been checking in on me more frequently since my health started to decline. "I think I need to go to the hospital," I managed to say when he answered. The words felt thick and strange in my mouth. Bill found me sitting on the kitchen floor, surrounded by ceramic shards and spilled coffee. He didn't waste time with questions, just helped me to my feet and into his car. The world lurched and spun around me as we drove, streetlights and bare tree branches blurring together into smears of light and shadow. The emergency room was crowded with winter ailments, flu cases, broken bones from icy falls, children with ear infections. We waited for over an hour before a young doctor with tired eyes and a 5 o'clock shadow called my name. He listened to my symptoms, ordered blood tests and an EKG, then left me lying on a gurney in the hallway for another hour. When he returned, his expression had shifted from routine weariness to professional concern. "Mr. Delaney," he said, glancing down at my chart, "your tests are showing some concerning results. I'd like to admit you for observation and additional testing." "What kind of results?" I asked, though part of me already knew the answer. I'd watched Eleanor waste away from cancer. I'd seen the same look on her doctors' faces. "Your cardiac enzymes are elevated, suggesting you may have experienced a minor heart attack," he said. "And your kidney function isn't what we'd like to see." "When was the last time you had a full physical?" I couldn't remember. Years, probably. After retirement, I'd avoided doctors as much as possible, hating the pitying looks they gave me when they examined my damaged knee, the way they clucked their tongues over my blood pressure readings and cholesterol levels. They admitted me to a room on the 4th floor with a view of the parking lot and the gray winter sky beyond. Bill promised to check on my house and bring me whatever I needed. I thanked him, though there wasn't much I needed anymore. Just one thing, really. One person who wasn't there. The next few days passed in a blur of tests and consultations. Each specialist who visited my room seemed to bring worse news than the last. My heart was failing, weakened by years of stress and the after effects of smoke inhalation during my career. My kidneys were struggling to keep up. The chronic pain in my knee had led to years of anti-inflammatory use that had taken its toll on my liver. "We can manage the symptoms," the cardiologist told me, a woman about Ellie's age with kind eyes and a gentle voice. "Make you comfortable. But I want to be honest with you, Mr. Delaney. The prognosis isn't good. We're looking at months, not years." I nodded, strangely calm in the face of this pronouncement. "Does it hurt? The end, I mean." She placed her hand over mine, a gesture so simple and human that it nearly broke through my composure. "We'll make sure it doesn't," she promised. That night, lying in the hospital bed listening to the beep of monitors and the squeak of nurses' shoes in the hallway, I made a decision. If I had only months left, there were things that needed to be said, things Ellie needed to hear, whether she wanted to or not. The next morning, I asked Bill to bring me my old video camera, a bulky Sony Handycam I'd bought when Ellie was in high school to record her piano recitals. He found it buried in the hall closet, battery long dead but still functional when plugged into an outlet. "What are you planning to do with this dinosaur?" he asked as he set it up on the rolling tray table beside my bed. "Just some recording," I said vaguely. "For posterity." He gave me a look that said he understood more than I was saying but didn't press the issue. "You need anything else? Books? Your own pajamas instead of that hospital gown?" I shook my head. "Just some privacy for a while." After he left, I adjusted the camera angle, making sure it captured me sitting up in the hospital bed. I looked terrible. I knew that without having to see the playback. My face was gaunt, my skin gray, my eyes sunken in their sockets. But it didn't matter how I looked, only what I said. I pressed the record button and cleared my throat. "Ellie," I began, my voice rough from disuse. "If you're watching this, well, I guess I'm not around anymore." I forced a smile that felt strange on my face. I've never been good with words. That was your mother's department, Eleanor, I mean. She always knew the right thing to say. Me, I just knew how to show up, how to do the job that needed doing. Maybe that's where I went wrong with you. Maybe you needed words more than actions. I paused, gathering my thoughts. Outside the window, snow had begun to fall, lazy white flakes drifting past the glass. I want to tell you about the night of the fire. Not just the facts, you know those now, but what it felt like, what it meant to me. I shifted in the bed, wincing as the movement pulled at the IV in my arm. When I carried you out of that burning building, something changed in me. Something that had been broken since Eleanor died began to heal. You were this tiny, frightened thing, but you looked at me with such trust, like you knew somehow that I wouldn't let anything happen to you. I swallowed hard, fighting back unexpected emotion. I'd lost my purpose when your mother died, lost my reason for getting up in the morning. But suddenly there you were, needing me, and I needed that, needed to be needed. Maybe that was selfish. Maybe I should have let someone younger adopt you, someone with a big family who could give you everything I couldn't. But I couldn't let you go. From the moment I found you, you were mine. The words were flowing more easily now, tumbling out after decades of being held back. I know I wasn't perfect. I know I was quiet when you needed me to talk, absent when you needed me present. I was afraid, Ellie. Afraid of doing it wrong. Afraid of losing you like I lost Eleanor. So I kept part of myself walled off, protected. And in doing that, I hurt you. I see that now. I reached for the water cup on the bedside table, taking a sip to ease my dry throat. About your biological father, Chambers. I should have told you sooner. I was trying to protect you, but maybe I was really protecting myself. Protecting the fragile relationship we had. I was afraid if you knew the whole truth, you'd leave and never come back. Ironic, isn't it? That's exactly what happened anyway. The snow was falling more heavily now, coating the cars in the parking lot with a thin white blanket. I don't have much time left, according to the doctors. And there's one more thing I need you to know, Ellie. The most important thing. I leaned closer to the camera, wanting her to see the truth in my eyes. Even if you hate me, I love you as if I'd made you with my own blood. Because real love, it doesn't need DNA. It just needs a heart willing to give everything, ask nothing, and keep beating despite the pain. I sat back against the pillows, suddenly exhausted. If you're watching this, I hope it's not too late. Not too late for you to understand. Not too late for you to forgive, not me necessarily, but yourself, for whatever guilt or anger you've been carrying. Let it go, Ellie. That's my last wish for you. I reached forward and stopped the recording, the effort leaving me breathless and dizzy. Outside, the snow continued to fall, erasing the world one white flake at a time. Over the next week, I made more videos. Sometimes I'd talk about Eleanor, sharing stories I'd never told Ellie about how we met, how we fell in love, how she fought her cancer with a grace that still humbled me to remember. Sometimes I'd reminisce about Ellie's childhood. The Halloween I'd stayed up all night making her a firefighter costume complete with a miniature helmet and boots. The summer I taught her to swim in the community pool. The Christmas morning, she'd surprised me with a hand-knitted scarf that I still wore every winter. Sometimes I'd just talk about ordinary things, recipes she might want to try, advice about home repairs, reflections on books we'd both read, normal father-daughter conversations we'd never had in real life. Each video ended the same way. Even if you hate me, I love you as if I'd made you with my own blood. By the 10th day, the effort of recording became too much. My strength was fading faster than the doctors had predicted. Bill visited daily, bringing small comforts from home and updates about neighbors and mutual friends, but never news of Ellie. I hadn't asked him to contact her, and he hadn't offered. Some silences speak volumes. On what would be my final recording, my voice was barely above a whisper, my hands trembling so badly I could hardly press the record button. "If you ever watch these videos," I said, "I hope it's not too late." Then I reached up and turned off the camera for the last time. They say death is like falling asleep, but that wasn't my experience. Death, for me, was more like watching a movie of my own life slowly fade to white, the edges blurring until I couldn't tell where memory ended and whatever comes after began. I remember fragments, the steady beep of hospital monitors slowing, a nurse's gentle hand on my forehead, Bill's gruff voice saying something that sounded like goodbye, then nothing. Or what I thought was nothing, until I realized I was somehow still aware, still watching, still present in a way I couldn't explain. I watched as they covered my body with a sheet, watched as Bill made phone calls from the hallway, his face lined with grief that surprised me. I hadn't realized he considered me such a close friend. Watched as the hospital staff efficiently removed all traces of my existence from room 412, preparing it for the next patient who would lie in that bed, stare at that ceiling, and contemplate their own mortality. Most strangely, I watched as Bill boxed up my few personal items, the old handycam among them, and carried them out to his car. I followed him, not by walking, but by simply shifting my awareness, like changing channels on a television. One moment I was in the hospital room, the next I was sitting beside him in his Ford F-150 as he drove the familiar route to my house. The February day was clear and cold. The snow from the previous week melted away to reveal brown grass and bare trees. My little ranch house looked smaller somehow, more fragile, as if my absence had already begun to diminish it. Bill used the spare key I'd given him to unlock the front door, then stood in the entryway for a long moment, as if unsure what to do next. Finally, he sighed and carried the box of my belongings to the kitchen table. He set the handycam aside and began sorting through the rest. My wallet, my watch, the dog-eared paperback I'd never finished reading. Then he picked up his phone and dialed a number. "Ms. Delaney, this is Bill Harmon, your father's neighbor." A pause. "I'm afraid I have some bad news." I couldn't hear Ellie's response, but I could see the impact of her words on Bill's face. A flicker of surprise, then understanding, then gentle determination. "I see," he said. "Well, I'm calling because your father passed away this morning. The doctors say his heart just gave out." Another pause. "Yes, I understand you're busy." "No, there's no rush. The funeral home is handling everything. They'll keep—" He stopped listening. "Yes, that's right. Jameson's on Oak Street." He ended the call and set the phone down with deliberate care, as if it might shatter. Then he looked around my kitchen, his gaze landing on the refrigerator where a 20-year-old crayon drawing by Ellie still hung, faded and curling at the edges, but never removed. "Damn it, Hank," he muttered. "You deserved better than this." I wanted to tell him it was okay, that I hadn't expected anything different, that Ellie's absence at my deathbed was just the final verse of a song we'd been singing for years. But of course I couldn't speak. I could only watch as Bill gathered up the handycam and its tapes, placing them in a separate bag before leaving the house, locking the door behind him. 3 days later, or what felt like 3 days in the strange, timeless state I now existed in, Bill returned to my house. This time he wasn't alone. Ellie followed him up the front walk, her shoulders hunched against the cold, her face hidden behind large sunglasses despite the cloudy day. "The key works in the deadbolt, but it sticks a little," Bill was saying as he jiggled the key in the lock. "Your dad kept meaning to get it fixed, but you know how he was with house repairs." Ellie made a non-committal sound, neither agreeing nor disagreeing. She stood on the porch like a stranger, not like someone who had spent her childhood in this house, who had left handprints in the concrete of the back patio, who had carved her initials into the oak tree in the backyard. The door swung open, and Bill stepped aside to let her enter first. She hesitated, then crossed the threshold, removing her sunglasses as she did. Her eyes were red-rimmed and puffy, though whether from grief or lack of sleep, I couldn't tell. "Everything's pretty much how he left it," Bill said, following her into the living room. "I've been collecting the mail and keeping an eye on things, but otherwise—" "Thank you," Ellie said, her voice flat and formal. "I appreciate you doing that. And for calling me." "Of course." Bill shifted uncomfortably. "Listen, I don't want to intrude, but there's something your father wanted you to have." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a flash drive. "I transferred the videos from his old camera to this. He made them in the hospital during those last days. They're all addressed to you." Ellie stared at the flash drive as if it might bite her. "Videos?" "He had a lot he wanted to say to you," Bill said simply. "Things he thought you should know." Slowly, Ellie reached out and took the flash drive, closing her fingers around it tightly. I'll look at them. Eventually." Bill nodded, seeming to understand that eventually might mean later that day or years from now. "Take your time, there's no rush now." He glanced at his watch. "I should go. Let you have some space. But if you need anything at all, I'm just across the street." After he left, Ellie stood in the middle of the living room, the flash drive still clutched in her hand. She looked around slowly, taking in the worn furniture, the faded curtains, the collection of framed photos on the mantelpiece that chronicled her life from infancy to adulthood. She moved to the mantel and picked up one of the frames, a photo of her at her high school graduation, standing stiffly beside me in my best suit. Neither of us was smiling exactly, but there was a tentative pride in both our postures, a cautious acknowledgement of the accomplishment. "Why didn't you ever say anything?" she whispered, addressing the man in the photograph. "All those years and you never told me you pulled me from a fire, that you saved my life." She set the photo down and wandered through the house, trailing her fingers over surfaces as if trying to absorb some essence of the life lived there. In the kitchen, she opened the refrigerator, still stocked with my modest groceries, milk now spoiled, vegetables wilting, and closed it quickly. In the hallway, she paused before the closed door of her childhood bedroom, hand on the knob but didn't enter. Finally, she made her way to my bedroom. It was sparse and neat, just as I'd always kept it. The bed was made with military precision. The nightstand held only a lamp and a book. The dresser top was clear except for a wooden box, Eleanor's box, in the corner. Ellie sat on the edge of the bed, the flash drive still in her hand. For a long moment, she just stared at it. Then she reached into her purse and pulled out her laptop, a sleek silver machine that looked out of place in the dated bedroom. "Let's get this over with," she murmured, plugging in the flash drive. A folder opened, containing 10 video files labeled simply 4LE1 through 4LE10. She hesitated, then clicked on the first one. My face filled the screen, gaunt and gray against the white hospital pillows. "Ellie," my recorded voice began, rough and weak but determined. "If you're watching this, I guess I'm not around anymore." Ellie's hand flew to her mouth, stifling a small sound of shock or grief. She paused the video, my frozen face staring out at her, then steeled herself and pressed play again. I watched as she viewed the first video without pausing again, her expression shifting from guarded hostility to confusion to something more complex. When it ended, she immediately started the second, then the third, watching them back to back without breaks. By the fourth video, tears were streaming down her face. By the seventh, she was openly sobbing, her shoulders shaking with the force of her grief. Still, she didn't stop, determined to hear everything I had to say. Every story, every explanation, every awkward expression of love I'd never managed to articulate in life. The final video was the shortest, just me, looking directly into the camera, my voice barely audible. "If you ever watch these videos, I hope it's not too late." When the screen went dark, Ellie sat motionless on the bed, tears still flowing unchecked down her cheeks. Then slowly, she closed her laptop and set it aside. She rose and moved to the dresser, opening the wooden box that had been Eleanor's. Inside were the items I'd kept most precious. Eleanor's wedding ring, the orphanage receipt, the fire investigation report, a lock of Ellie's hair from her first haircut, the note I'd written but never sent when she left for college. Ellie lifted out the receipt, its edges blackened and crumbling with age. She handled it with reverence as if it were a holy relic instead of a bureaucratic form. Then she found a small picture frame on the dresser, removed the generic landscape print it held, and carefully placed the receipt inside. "I'm sorry, Dad," she whispered, the word Dad catching in her throat. "You always were the only one who really loved me." She carried the framed receipt to the living room and placed it on the coffee table. Then she curled up on the couch, the same couch where I used to nap on Sunday afternoons, where she used to sit reading while I watched baseball games with the volume turned low. She pulled the old Afghan from the back of the couch. Eleanor had crocheted it decades ago, and wrapped it around her shoulders. And there, surrounded by the ghosts of her past, Ellie finally allowed herself to grieve for the father she'd never truly known until it was too late. Or perhaps not too late after all. Because as I watched her, I felt a lightness begin to spread through whatever remained of my consciousness. A sense of completion, of circuits finally closed. The wall between us hadn't fallen in life, but perhaps in death, something had been healed nonetheless. I couldn't touch her, couldn't comfort her, couldn't wipe away her tears. But as her grief began to soften into something quieter, more reflective, I felt myself beginning to fade, my awareness growing diffuse and peaceful. The last thing I saw before whatever came next claimed me was my daughter, holding the receipt from the day she became mine, whispering, "I love you too, Dad," to a father who could no longer hear her, but who somehow, against all odds, still knew. Sometimes the most profound love exists in the spaces between words, in the sacrifices we make silently, in the truths we withhold to protect those we cherish, in the pain we carry alone so others don't have to. Hank's story reminds us that being a parent isn't about blood or DNA, but about the choice to put someone else's well-being above your own, even when they can't see or appreciate it, even when they might hate you for it. What would you have done in Hank's position? Would you have revealed the truth sooner, risking a child's sense of security for honesty? Or would you have carried that burden alone, hoping that someday, somehow, they would understand the depth of your love without needing to know its origins? The hardest truths often come too late, after the funeral, after the goodbye, after our chance to say "I understand now" has passed. Perhaps the real tragedy isn't that Ellie discovered the truth after Hank's death, but that we all wait too long to seek understanding from those who love us most. If this story touched your heart, please help us share these moments of raw human connection with others. Follow our channel for more stories that remind us of the complex beauty of family, forgiveness, and the redemptive power of love. Like, share, and tell us in the comments. What secret would you keep to protect someone you love? And what truth would you need to hear before it's too late?